Hello, everyone. Wow, my voice is really loud now. Thanks so much for having me, guys. So without further ado, my name is Doug Hindson. I'm a director, animator, illustrator, and general maker, and recently graduated from Kingston University. So I'd like to kick things off by showing my recent graduation film, which touches on some of the fraught relationships that we often have with technology. So I'll show that first, and then I'll talk for a little bit.
Someone said that we are the generation who share everything. Well, not everything. Online personas are carefully crafted things. Who really wants to see a photo of you reheating yesterday's spaghetti bolognese anyway? But now that we're so tightly wound up in this social media, the only question left is, do I want to share my life as a series of mundane 6-second videos or a feed of reblogged flavour of the month images? This is all trivial, really. A young man grappling with his relatively inconsequential first world problems. And how long before this kid here is summing up his life in 140 characters? He probably already is. I bet he's got more followers than me. I guess what it boils down to is happiness. Happy is something that we, as a generation, rarely seem to be. It's not that we're unhappy, it's that we're not happy. And it's not as though we're the first generation to feel this way either. Not the first to ask ourselves these questions. We won't end up like that couple, will we? Suddenly finding ourselves without anything to say to each other. Maybe that's the reason we crave the constant connection technology promises us. Deep down, we're afraid of the moments when we are truly alone. Because it is in these gaps that regrets and worries come flooding in. I mean, shouldn't I be doing something more meaningful with my time? It's not that I'm not enjoying what I'm doing. It's just that I wonder what I would be doing if I wasn't doing this. Would I be the person I'd always feared I'd become? Or would I be the person I'd always dreamed I'd be? What can we do but keep on going, heading in whichever direction seems best at the time?
Yes. Somewhat crude, but hopefully charming at the same time. When I started making this film, I was grabbed by the fact that coming-of-age films and coming-of-age stories are something that can continually told and retold. So why do these narratives remain relevant and actually hardly change? There are issues and experiences which every generation has to grapple with in their own way and on their own terms, and yet it's important to remember that we are not the first people to face them. So I think technology is a great place to start with that. And I'd like to go back to the basics at the risk of patronizing everyone and also getting very theoretical, so I apologize in advance. I've also thrown in a Plato quote to make myself sound more intelligent than I am. The German philosopher Ernst Kapp defined technology as an extension and an expansion of ourselves, our biological processes, organs, and physical attributes. So basic axe was an extension of our arm, allowing far more efficient killing and butchering, and the discovery of fire allowed some of the stomach's processes to be outsourced so that food was broken down more easily, and both of these advancements basically allowed our brains to develop into the incredibly complex organs that they are now. And so as we developed, so did technology, and telescopes extended the range of our human vision. Machines allowed massive amplification of our physical strength. Kapp would say that true self-realization is through technology. Few would argue that these developments were detrimental overall to humans. They've allowed us to overcome the grind of simply surviving and allowed us to focus on more creative pursuits. The author Marshall McLuhan, writing in 1966, predicted a time when creativity was at the reach of everyone. Rapidly, we approach the final phase of the extensions of man. The technological simulation of consciousness, when the creative process will be collectively and corporately extended to the whole of human society. So perhaps we've almost reached that point, not quite the simulation of consciousness, but certainly accessibility to creativity for almost the whole of human society, thanks largely to the internet, for better or worse. And it's always quite popular to cynically sneer at technology in general, I think, especially today. But as you'll see later on, it's sort of always been the case. You don't have to look very far to see a slew of articles describing how the next generation is fucked and will only be able to interact by the comfort of a glowing rectangle, or how if we could only turn away from the evil that is social media, we would suddenly rekindle those failing relationships and stride out into the sunlight and find happiness. Perhaps they're right, but I see these as symptoms rather than the problem itself. Tech magnifies issues, holding a mirror up to society. So maybe we do get the tech we deserve. So at this point, I find it quite comforting to see that actually we're far from the first people to worry about these issues. Here's the Plato quote. And so he was actually worried about the introduction of writing over 2,000 years ago. He says, if men learn this, it will implant forgetfulness in their souls. They will cease to exercise memory because they rely on that which is written, calling things to remembrance no longer from within themselves, but by means of external marks. It's pretty easy to dismiss Plato's worries with the gift of hindsight. Obviously, we still do talk a little bit face to face. But it's important to remember how much of an impact the written word would have had on a society and a culture that had previously only communicated via the spoken word. And Plato was anxious for society not to abandon one thing in the pursuit of another. Skipping ahead to the 1800s and the Industrial Revolution, the Luddites rebelled against the increasing mechanization of manufacturing, smashing machines in protest against the lowering of workers' conditions, and perhaps in fear of what the result would be for society at large. The Scottish author Thomas Carlyle writes in 1829 that technology causes a mighty change in the modes of thought and feeling. Men are grown mechanical in head and in heart, as well as in hand. So it's interesting to draw the parallel between the worries of these historical technological shifts and the one which we experience now as digitalness pervades everyday life. So technological development often has inevitable consequences, perhaps creating problems or side effects in the process of trying to solve others. I quite like the story of Daedalus and Icarus as an analogy for this. He crafts a set of wings for them both, knowing full well that the impetuous young man will most likely not heed his warnings and fly too close to the sun. Sure enough, Icarus plummets to the ground in flames. The anonymity that the internet makes possible allows people to experiment with different identities, but as a side effect, also breeds a toxic culture devoid of repercussions. Whilst online social networks extend our connection to our friends, they may tend to diminish the face-to-face communication. So if we go back to the definition of technology as an extension of ourselves description, it actually becomes quite difficult to find the real human value to the technology which perpetuates itself today. In fact, oftentimes we actually create technology to help us deal with some of the technology we've already created. Case in point, the selfie stick that we all love to hate. Tech makes things easier, but it does not necessarily bring a purpose to our lives. There's a skew towards consumption and repetition rather than creation. So does technology now provide solutions to problems that never existed? iPod toilet roll dock, anyone? But then technically, we didn't need fire or axes or telescopes or machines or the internet. We could still be living in the primordial ooze. But then where would we be? Covered in ooze, and no one wants to be covered in ooze, except him. So technical development is to a certain extent inevitable. There's no going back. But I think we need more critical adoption and perhaps a slightly Luddite approach. Small changes to our everyday life, unplugging every once in a while, in order to really connect through the fantastic technology we have around us. Thanks very much.